Hello there. In this video, I'm going to explain how to properly zero a cutter in a top-loading rotary engraving spindle. On the engraving spindle, you'll see at the bottom you have a micrometer here. Typical engraving spindle has 25 graduations on the micrometer in one full revolution. So the first thing you want to do is take your micrometer and set it on 0. I have my micrometer set on 0 now. You can't really see it. It's hard to see even with a magnifying glass. So you also want to make sure you have some thread showing at top here, at the top of the micrometer here. This will give you, I'll say, wiggle room, so you can turn it upwards when you need to be able to increase depth. So you might, rule of thumb is turn the micrometer all the way up to the top upwards until it stops, and then back it off, say 4 revolutions. That's usually pretty good. And then set it on 0 here at the pointer. So what our goal is when we drop, for setting a new cutter and zeroing a new cutters, we want to drop it into the spindle, and our goal is to set the cutter so it's flush with the bottom of the nose at the bottom here. In this case, it's a vacuum nose, vacuum chip removal nose. Once it's accurately zeroed, then you can take the micrometer and dial it upwards to expose cutter, basically, which will increase your depth into the material. So typical engraving stock, laminate engraving stock, what I usually set my micrometer at after I zero a cutter is 10 clicks. So I'd bring it up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now that would expose 10 thousandths of cutter, and because we have a floating spindle, we'll have a nice accurate 10 thousandths depth across the engraving table into the material. The engraving spindle with the floating head and micrometer like this one here is critical for accurate depth into the material. So now I'm going to take a typical looking engraving cutter here, cutter wrench. I'm going to loosen, for a new cutter that I get, what I usually do is take the set screw, loosen the set screw on the brass knob here and bring it down a little bit, a couple inches, and then drop it into the spindle at top. And you'll learn quickly that this is a left-hand thread. So you turn it to the left to lock it in place, and when you want to take it out, you turn it to the right. Also, when I'm zeroing a cutter, I like to zero it on a hard metal surface. I like to have a piece of metal, such as this piece of stainless, whatever it is, lay it on the table. Of course, the table itself is also metal, so you could go straight to the table, but many times you have engraving plastic on the table or something. So therefore, you want to have a piece of metal like this to put on top of the plastic. And again, the reason for the metal is there's no forgiveness. When you drop the cutter down to the metal, you're not going to go into the metal at all and give yourself a false depth, as you would with engraving plastic. If you drop the cutter down to engraving plastic, it's pretty soft, so therefore you could give yourself a couple thousandths of depth that you don't want. So, next thing, you want to take your system and jog the spindle out and down until you know you're touching the metal. I know I'm touching it because I could see my spindle floated. Next, I'm going to loosen the set screw here. I can hear it hit the metal. As you're applying just a little downward pressure, tighten the set screw. Never over tighten that set screw. It doesn't do any good to your wrench, and it doesn't do any good to the shank of the cutter. So if I jog the Z back up now, my cutter is now flush at the bottom of this nose. And again, cutter being stationary, when I increase depth here, 10 clicks, I'm going to get 10 thousandths depth into the material when I come down and engrave. As long as this black nose, vacuum nose, is touching my material when I'm engraving, I'm going to get my 10 thousandths depth. So if you wanted to cut your 16th inch plastic, say, out of the material, say circles, shapes, name badges, and whatnot, you could zero another cutter for that, say a 10 thousandths. My favorite cutter is a 010 10 thousandths cutter to cut out my material. Once you zero that cutter, then what you can dial your micrometer at is one full revolution upwards all the way to 0 gives you 25 thousandths depth. Another full revolution to 0 gives me 50 thousandths depth. Then I'll go, because 16th inch material, doing the math on that, it's like 0.60 rounded off. You could go up to 55, 56, 57, maybe 58 or 57. So that way you're not going all the way through your material. And that's it. That's how you zero a cutter.